Hello everyone, welcome back to another video of my opinions about classical music. It's been so long since I made a video like this, so it's super great to be back. Of course, it's super nice to have you back as well if you're an old viewer, and if you're a new viewer, welcome! I hope you enjoy this video. I bet you guys are so excited for today's video, and let's be honest, so am I. Because, of course, it's completely random that I chose to do the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto when there's a 4 million subscribers stream happening in just a couple of days. Or, well, a couple of days when I'm recording at least. Probably is more like tomorrow, I guess, when it's posted. But it's still so exciting. But it's not related to that at all. This is completely random that these are happening at the same time, right? Yeah. Completely random. So anyway, today's video is, as I mentioned, about the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, or rather the first movement, because it's quite long, and I've decided to look at the first movement more specifically. I suppose I could have done the second movement, it's one of my favorites, I really enjoy listening to it, but I think the first movement is a bit more interesting. Like a lot of composers, Mendelssohn, and that is Felix Mendelssohn, not Fanny Mendelssohn, is really good at making a lot of soup with very few vegetables. I do believe I've talked about this kind of composing before. I think it may have been with the Beethoven string quartet that I spoke about a long time ago actually. And obviously Beethoven is a master of making vegetable soup, but I will argue that Mendelssohn is quite good as well. So just to go over it again, what do I mean when I say making vegetable soup? Let's just imagine for a second that a composition or a piece is a vegetable soup. Vegetable soup can obviously consist of many different kinds of vegetables. And some composers are really good at adding a lot of vegetables to their soups and making it sound or taste good, while others are really good at making amazing vegetable soup with very few vegetables. So if we translate the vegetables into musical fragments or themes if you want, then you may see what I mean. Beethoven and Mendelssohn and a lot of other composers were great at making amazing pieces with very little musical material. Instead of throwing in a bunch of different musical themes or fragments or whatever, they just reuse the same ones and scramble them up so you don't really recognize them anymore. And this is a great trick to make your piece coherent even though you make it really long. So to look at that today, I've decided to do a fragment analysis of the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. And just as a heads up to all the musicologists that are obviously watching this video, this is not gonna be super deep. We're gonna scratch the surface a bit and look a bit more closely at some things, but this is mostly superficial. We're just gonna look at it and I'm gonna give my opinion about stuff. Because, obviously, this is my opinions about classical music, but if you spot something that I've missed, I would love to hear it, even if you're not a musicologist, actually. Just leave it in the comments down below and I'll read everything, I promise. And this applies if you're not a musicologist as well, or if you just have thoughts about the piece, if you like a part or whatever, just comment it down below, I'd love to hear it. But anyway, I've been yapping about different stuff for about 4 minutes now, so maybe let's just jump into the piece. So to start off, let's just start with the main theme that everyone's probably heard, and you will notice in the sheet music I've highlighted it with some colors, and I'm going to explain them obviously. So that was the main theme of the Violin Concerto. Let's just look at the first part and I'll explain all the colors I've used. So as you can tell, I've already used 4 different colors in just the first 6 bars, because obviously I'm crazy, and probably some of you will be like, this is a bit far-fetched, but just hear me out, okay? basically to explain, I've used different colors to highlight different fragments that I've found throughout the piece. Sometimes the fragments come back, but they're not like exactly the same, and I've highlighted those in a lighter shade of the same color. So for the red ones I've used orange, for the green one is a lighter green, and so on. And I can already tell you that these come back a lot, and I will not be going through every single instance of this, but if you're interested in seeing it and you read some sheet music and stuff, I will link the PDF down below, so you can download it and look at my analysis if you like. So just to be sure we're on the same page, let's just listen through the different fragments. I'll highlight them as they show up. So that was the fragments of the first theme. But there's a second theme in the Mendelssohn, and I'm going to show you that right now. So that was the second theme of the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. And as you can see, the green fragment actually comes back in the second theme. But you see a new color here, and that is the dark blue. And let me tell you, that's used a lot throughout the piece. Let me show you an example. So if you look at this part right here, you can see that it's not exactly the same as we had before with the blue theme. It's actually sped up to double the tempo. And that is obviously because this part is supposed to be a show-off kind of part, right? Because obviously, what is a violin concerto if you don't have anywhere to show off? But what you can also see is that the accompaniment is actually playing the first theme. And the further we go, you can see there are other colors introduced in the accompaniment, and the blue is kind of splitting up a bit. But that is only until we get to this part right here, where it's the main point of this blue build-up that we've had, and you get all the different colors, and it's really beautiful actually. Let's just have a quick listen to this part. It's a really nice part, I quite like it. Wasn't that great? I think it was anyway. But to move on, the next part I wanted to look at is the cadenza. Or well, not the whole cadenza, but a part of it, because it's quite interesting. And look, I get that this may look quite far-fetched for some of you, but to me it kind of looks like that in these orange parts is actually the red fragment. Just kind of the contour of it. Just me. Let me know what you think. But it fits too, right? Because later in the cadenza he uses the red theme, as you can see. I just think it makes sense in many ways that the orange parts are based on the red fragment, but maybe it's just me. The bonus interesting part about the cadenza is that Mendelssohn actually wrote it himself, because normally the soloist would improvise a cadenza and then the composer just had to deal with it. But Mendelssohn decided he didn't want that, so he wrote it out in full. I suppose maybe he just didn't trust his friend to improvise some. It was written for his friend, so I suppose he would know if he was a good improviser or not. But it makes it fit with the next part, where the soloist basically accompanies the whole orchestra while the orchestra plays the main theme. And we're gonna skip talking about that because it's not like super interesting. Not to me anyway. And instead we're going to talk about this part because I love this one. We have a key change to E major, which is quite interesting because we started in E minor, and even though that sounds not too far away, it's quite far away, like music theory wise, but it's so nice. Just listen to the winds of this part. And then comes the violin to play the same thing. And here's the hint, we're going back to E minor again. And this is the point where we get back to E minor. And at this point, a lot of the fragments we've already heard are coming back and we hear them again. And that pretty much applies all the way to the end of the movement, but I think it's quite interesting what's happening in the last part, in the Presto part at the end. So I want to check that out too. We're gonna listen through it, but I want you to take note of the fact that in the solo violin part, the fragments are mysteriously missing, which I think is quite interesting. I've been very kind and highlighted the solo violin part in a pale green, so you can see. But that doesn't mean we have no fragments in this part. We have the orchestra providing all the fragments. And that pretty much is what's going on all the way to the end, where we land on a beautiful E minor chord, and it leads into the second movement with the bassoon, which is quite interesting. So, with all this in mind, let's just listen to the end of the movement. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you had a great time or if you learned something, I would of course love it if you press the like button. Definitely let me know down below what you learned if you did learn something. And if you find that you enjoy my videos in general, I would definitely suggest subscribing, as I'm not really that great at keeping a schedule for this. So if you want to be sure you're not missing any videos, then definitely hit the bell button as well, but no pressure for any of it. And with that, I hope I'll see you next time.